Hi, everyone. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. Welcome to our Exemplary Catholic Leaders series. Today, my special guest is Ben Smolij. He's a partner at Winston and Strom law firm, and he's going to talk to us about some interesting topics that relate to the law and life. And so, Ben, how are you today?
Doing well, Henry. Thank you.
That's great. Well, the audience always expects me to talk about the faith with you at the very beginning. And so, can you tell us about your faith journey? Where have you come from and how is it working in your life now?
Absolutely happy to do so. So I'm a cradle Catholic. So I was born and raised, actually born in Poland, raised in a Polish family. And Catholicism is something that runs deep in the culture and our way of life. So that's something that's been with me from the very beginning. And sort of as I progressed through life and matured and began going through the stages, it kind of grew in me, especially during law school, was probably the time that well, I was always a mass going Catholic. I think I've really deepened in the faith during law school, as you know, obviously the demands of the work were very high, and I needed something to balance that out with. And I found that regular prayer, spending time in adoration, and just simply learning about the faith was one of the best ways that I sort of coped with that and really grew in my faith. And then getting married, I got married in law school, had my first kid in law school, actually, in my third year.
Mhm.
That brought with it, a whole other element, right? And so uh, over time, you're balancing between time that you have available and have to make yourself available between work and family obligations and social obligations, and then the faith life kind of adapts with that, right? And so that's kind of where I've come to, but it's definitely been a lifelong Catholic, and it's been a very important element in my life.
Well, and so thank you for telling us that, Ben. A lot of people tell us that some of them follow the intellectual route where they come to Catholicism that way. Some people get, so to speak, knocked off their horse. On the way to Damascus, they get knocked off their horse and they have a powerful experience. You've been a cradle Catholic come from a Polish family like me. I understand that Polish culture very well, and so it's come to the point where you've always practiced the faith. And with respect to your profession, so you're a lawyer or an attorney, I guess we would call you. And how does the faith actually affect your work? That you're in a secular law firm, you might say, and you don't only deal with Catholic clients or Catholic issues, but how does the faith actually permeate a career in law?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the way I view it is really that being an attorney is really, it's been a calling for me. I think I started down a different road after college, kind of in the finance world, even though deep down inside I've always been interested in the law. And then big opportunity came. It was actually a blessing in disguise with the 2008 financial crisis. I had to pivot a
Mm.
little bit and came back into the law. So I really feel like this is where I'm called to be. It's a profession that has a lot of well, many great saints that have been lawyers. Saint Thomas More,
Yes. Yes.
and he's a great patron saint of mine that I pray to regularly. Um, and so I think in terms of the discipline that it requires in terms of the day-to-day work, but also the big ethical obligations that we face, and making sure that we are always above reproach in every situation, treating clients with the highest regard, and as well as the profession itself. And oftentimes we are the gatekeepers, between um, conduct that is appropriate and above board versus when people try to cut corners, right? And so we are have a big responsibility as attorneys in that regard. And so that's I think that's where the faith and the profession kind of intertwine, and clients really appreciate the counsel that we can give them, especially from, if you yourself are very grounded in the faith and kind of have that steady hand, and can give that confident advice, and making sure that everything is done in a proper manner. That's one of the kind of guiding principles of our profession, I believe.
And that's a great it's a great reminder to us. I think in the pursuit of virtue, we want truth and justice and all of the great virtues. And so, if in the practice of your profession you can actually implement those and search for virtue in that way and help your clients to do that, I mean, that's a great thing, because not everybody has that opportunity, or it may not seem as directly connected, the practice of virtue, with your actual situation. Do people come to you, Ben, with you know impossible situations? I have a sense that some people that come to us at the Catholic CEO for business help, they come when it's late in the game. And so I'm just curious if you have any sense of whether people come in a preparatory manner or they come with a crisis on their hands and land it on your desk. Ben, help me, solve me.
Yes, that problem is very familiar to me, as probably
Mhm.
any of your attorney audience can agree. We don't always choose our clients or choose the situations that we're in. Oftentimes, we get the call when uh, everything is sort of spinning and a mess, and it's our job to step in and guide our clients through it and guide the transactions through. And so that's certainly, chaos is something that I definitely see a lot of. Not always. Sometimes, we get good, clear, we have schedules and things are more orderly, but more often than not, there's definitely a problem that needs very quick solving. And that's why, they come to us to achieve quick results that benefit the client. And usually, at least in my world, I'm not a litigator, I'm a transactional attorney. And so there's not, there's if the deal closes, everybody wins. There's not winners and losers, as like, or zero sum game like you have in litigation. So it's typically everyone working towards the same goal of getting transactions done in the most efficient and successful manner. So that often happens. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about, whether you're in the courtroom in litigation, but you're not, and so I was going to ask you questions about the justice system and how that accords with the Catholic the faith. But even in contracts or in transactions, they have to. Well, everybody has to fulfill their obligations. So one of the questions that comes to us regularly, Ben, is, Catholics who enter into contracts, they do come to us and they say, is it possible to ever have a Catholic contract that's kind of, I don't know, principle based, or is based on not on a handshake, but on a different kind of set of constructs, as opposed to the protections and all of the complex language that goes into a contract? Any opinion on that sort of thing? Is there such a thing as a Catholic contract, perhaps?
So yeah, my job is to keep people out of the courtroom, and
Mhm.
out of litigation. So that's why we always try to make sure all agreements, all documents, all disclosure are perfectly clear, accurate, and true. Also, that there's no ambiguity, because in ambiguity you often get different viewpoints. Usually, in hindsight, when there's a different interpretation, that'd be more favorable. Um, but obviously, it's important who you enter into transactions with, right? And
Mhm.
you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself as much as you can trust the other side, and everything is going well. Is still need to do your due diligence, and that's something we always advise and our clients on and help with. It's important to understand what you're getting yourself into. Um, but as far as contracts go, it's kind of hard to deviate from the standard forms. Obviously, they're negotiated for the specific transactions, but there's just certain things that you need to have in there that have been recognized by the system, by the courts, as providing certain protections. And I would be remiss not to have all those protections in place for my client and negotiate, put them in the absolute best position they can be, that in the event of anything happening down the road, they are protected. They protected themselves, on paper, but also in terms of disclosure. Everything was disclosed that needed to be said. Nothing was hidden. All these things of just conducting an honest transaction are important, especially when you consider, down the road, people have buyer's remorse. They change, and they often want to retrade the deal.
Right. Yeah. Ben, get me out of this. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Another area, Ben, that I think our audience would be interested in, because we're a consultancy. We work with Catholic business owners who are, in some cases, doing startups. Not everybody, but many are doing a startup, and they're involved in searching for capital. So I'll ask you a couple of questions. One would be, what advice do you have for people in a practical way to prepare to be legally protected and anticipatory of what could happen in a startup? And then let's say in the area, the second question would be relating to capital. I noticed that a lot of people, as they get into the angel financing or VC financing, they're raising capital, and there's tremendous negotiations on valuation and so on, and they often get into trouble on that. What advice have you for people that are in that startup or capital phase?
Yeah, and I always love to talk to people in that space. I typically in my practice get involved just a little bit past that startup phase. So typically, when they're growing and maturing a little bit and starting to scale, that's what we'll come in and find ways to inject more capital on more favorable terms than you might see kind of in the early stages. But as a general matter, obviously in the early stages, oftentimes you're operating on a shoestring budget. You're trying to devote all the resources you can to actually growing your business, and don't want to get too involved in spending money on lawyers and accountants and consultants, and I get all that. But what I tend to find as these companies grow and develop and then want to take the next step, those that kind of have a lot of those foundational pieces and proper reporting, internal sort of reporting and record keeping systems, good kind of governance practices within their organizations, little things that maybe uh, have a cost on the front end. I definitely recommend always to get a trusted lawyer involved in these processes, because they can set up a system to where it kind of starts to run on its own afterwards. You have your forms, you have your at least your bylaws, your corporate documents, you have policies, so that as you grow, you have something to fall back on as questions arise. So I think that kind of preparation, putting those fundamentals into place, are definitely helpful down the road, especially.
Yeah, so to anticipate or at least do some thinking and planning ahead, I guess is where you're heading.
Yeah, yeah. I think definitely have that conversation with as far as legal matters, but also that goes into your commercial contracts, the contracts you have with vendors. It kind of hits many different areas of your business, sometimes areas that you might not even think of. You want to make sure that you're organized and protected as best as you can be, given where you are in the stage of growth.
Yeah. I have some other, I mean, there are some people who in the Catholic CEO world that we work in, they they might be doing a succession plan, founder to successor, that type of thing. Or they're doing estate planning, or there's wills. And again, we're not asking for your technical advice today, although it would be very handy to do so. But what do you say to people who about all this? So many people don't have a will, and if they die suddenly, there's a real mess on their hands. And I suppose you've probably have seen that. I've seen it with some of our clients who, in fact, I did a daily email we do regular emails to our clients with business tips and Catholic connections. And I just did one on the title was "When the Founder Dies Suddenly." and it's happened. I've seen it happen. What do you say to it? I mean, so obviously, let's get ready and prepare, but what is the logic and the rationale for telling people to be ready for such things?
Yeah, I'm not even going to pretend to be a trust and estates lawyer. There's specialists that are very well versed in all matters, trust, estates, also succession planning. But just from a basic, if you can look at the very big companies, right? I mean, they have very detailed procedures as to what happens both in the case of incapacity of key decision makers, the sudden death or illness, and they have it spelled out very particularly, including, which role takes over what responsibilities and what's the chain of command and what are the communications like and what committees are formed and who takes over what aspect. And, those are, not everyone can do that, right? But I think, as always, preparing is worth a lot more than an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So it's important to take those steps, think about those things. Obviously, there's a lot of things to think about, but um, you want to at least have some kind of game plan, some kind of um, policy written that in the event XYZ happens, here's what we all agree should be the result. And oftentimes you will get that agreement because it's common sense. At the time,
Mhm. Yes.
when it happens suddenly, all of a sudden you have competing interests, you have perhaps different people angling for different positions, and it gets way messier and more complicated. That's why I think having those early conversations, those documents put in place, those policies or those procedures, something that everyone kind of signed on to, uh, ideally in writing, but if not in writing, it's been discussed, and so it doesn't come as a complete shock and becomes disruptive to the very thing that those people worked to create.
Yeah, yeah, understood. Ben, another area that I know that people will be interested in, balance, life balance. I was called in one time about 10 years ago to an actual law firm uh, in Calgary, Alberta, and there was as a consultant, the partners were used to, and I'm not sure if I have the number right. You'd know, but it's 2,200 hours a year, or is it 2,400 hours a year? Whereas the associates, the more junior people, were ready to do 1,600 or 1,800 hours, and so there was a conflict, and that's only the presenting issue there. But I'm just Catholic man like yourself, a husband, a father, a business guy, an attorney. How do you balance it all when the expectations of your profession seem to be that it's heavy workload all the time? And how do you do that? What advice have you for us about balancing?
Yeah, the expectations are certainly high. We all have targets. Every lawyer you'll talk to has targets. Um, and at some point, at least where I am now, you're balancing. You have a lot of hats on, right? I mean, on the one hand, I'm still an expert in my field. I have to stay on top of all the developments that happen very quickly, sort of in the SEC capital markets world.
Yes.
Um, Also, I have to do the work, oftentimes review documents, give that advice, study up, and review and research many different topics and documents, but also work to win the next client, right, or the next transaction. So uh, I think the time gets split in many different ways. And what you brought up, the example of the partners working 2,400 hours and the associates 1,600. Usually that's flipped, but I know there's generational expectations that are very much differing, and we're all adjusting to that. But balance is important, especially bringing the faith aspect to it. Probably the reason I was it came so easy to me in law school is just that all I had to do was really study, and then I can devote time to reading up on faith matters, or going to daily mass, or different activities around the church. It was kind of easy back then. When you have when you're a business owner, when you're a professional, you have a family, all that becomes more challenging. And by no means have I figured out the secret. And I think just depending on the season of life you go through, um, different phases depending on what's going on professionally and personally. But I think the advice is uh, a couple fold. One is do what you can, right? And for different people, that means different things. Um, I have 4 kids, so sometimes getting to mass with everyone on time and staying there through the duration of mass is a massive accomplishment and
Mhm.
something to be proud of. Other times, a daily rosary or going to adoration or some lecture on there's many different offerings that I think keep your focus on where it needs to be, right? And so I think whatever you can do to keep that on the forefront, keep prayer on the forefront is very important and sort of balancing everything because especially when it comes to making decisions, right? I mean, we all as business owners have to make many decisions many times throughout the day, and if you can, ask the Holy Spirit for help in that, believe me, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions you can feel confident about. Um, and also just staying involved with like-minded people I think is important because there's
Mm.
many people going through the same challenges as you are in balancing everything, or as your listeners may be. So it's important to keep that network strong. It's not only important for yourself but also um, uh, we all need to help each other out. So I think that's an important element as well.
You've said something I think that's very, very valuable for, the viewers. This idea of a support network around you, I think is very powerful. I see this, from my own children and grandchildren. I see that they're in their respective cities that they live in. They're surrounding themselves with like-minded people who are perhaps in the same or similar situation, but they're trying to live the Catholic faith within their professions, whatever they are. So I think it's important what you've just said, and I think you've also said that it's. I wouldn't use the word situational because that sort of reminds us of relativism, but it is situational in a certain sense. When you were a student in law school, I suppose it was easy because those obligations that you have, the duties of a father and a husband, weren't there, but now they are, and at the same time you have to stay sharp on your profession. So it's situational and that's it. Would that be right? Something like that?
I think so. Yeah, it's there's always going to be different things going on. It seems like it never ends, and there are periods of time when you're just fully occupied in one sphere or the other, and so that's you have to find a balance and find some ground, some foundation that you can always go back to and rely on, no matter what the season of life is. But of course, there's only 24 hours in a given day. You're only awake for, a certain amount of them. So you have to allocate that time. And that's certainly a challenge. And something I look back on frequently. I reflect on, how am I spending my time? How am I spending my day? What can I do better? Where can I, be more efficient? I think that's always helped me to kind of find the areas where I can improve, which is important too.
I remember this is a story about me a little bit. I remember that when the kids were growing up, one of my principles was I never missed a birthday. I never traveled out of the city on business on one of the children's birthdays. And I remember getting some flack for it a little bit. And I may have paid a small price for that in terms of the business, but just saying that's an example of what comes to my mind. I'm sure you've had to do that too. You don't always get to every soccer game or every I don't know event. You try, but sometimes it's impossible. So but you've said this a moment ago. We have to keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to the support system, the network, I think
Mhm.
we all as Catholics can do a lot better with that. I think a lot, we can look to other groups that are very successful at this. I think we need to really strive to make strong connections with each other. And that can be, we're very blessed to be at a very good Catholic school, connected to a parish, and we have many close friends there, great friends, a great parish, but whatever it is for you, find that network and seek them out. I know there's plenty of Catholic lawyer organizations. There's or just Catholic professional organizations, but we should really try to help each other out. Um, even in the business sense, right? I mean, if there's a vendor you can use from someone that's similarly situated, that you make those connections that can really benefit everybody. So I would definitely encourage that, and I try to do that more myself. But I think we would all gain from that.
That's music to my ears because we try to promote the Catholic economy. I always say to people, when you need your plumber, look in the parish bulletin first. Don't go to the, down the street
Right.
type of thing. So, uh, Ben, there's so many things we could talk about. One last question before I ask you to summarize where we can find you and so on. Young people, say somebody in college considering the law as a profession, and a Catholic, what would you say to them? What's your advice to them? Obviously, they want a good placement and they want to be ethical and honorable. Yes, but what would you say to a young person considering the law today?
Yeah. So, for me, it always felt like a calling. So I just needed the circumstances to I wish God definitely created for me, and it was sort of an easy thing to step into. I think if I'm faced with different choices, definitely talk to people that are in the profession. Myself, I'm always happy to talk with young people. Most lawyers are. Lawyers love to talk about themselves and their practice, so you'll have no problems there. But
Mhm.
definitely talk to people, see what the career sort of possibilities are. People, the law is very broad. There's people involved in government, private practice, and litigation, corporate within corporate. There's real estate, finance, M&A, capital markets, tax, ERISA. I mean, there's just so many areas, and just to take a look at the whole menu and see if anything really speaks to you based on your sort of natural things that you enjoy, things that you feel you can excel at. And I think you will find some area that you would like to pursue. But definitely pray about it. It's a big decision. Law school is very expensive. Law school's difficult. You want to go in knowing, you know, everything there is to know, not just about the practice of law, but law school itself as well. So definitely take advantage of those other lawyers around you, talk to them, and get all the facts. But otherwise, if that's where you're called to go, then it's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, it sounds like it is worth it, and I'm happy to know that you're so pleased with it in the sense that it can be done with a family and all the obligations, and it's an honorable profession. So thanks for telling us about that. Where do we find you if we want to find your services and connect with you? What's the best place to do that?
Sure. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I like to use LinkedIn as sort of a platform for um, giving updates about myself, but also updates about my particular practice. So I always give SEC updates or various kind of corporate law
Hmm.
updates. So I use LinkedIn frequently. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, connect. I'd be happy to talk. Otherwise, you can find my email on the firm of my website on the website of my firm, Winston and Strawn, and I'm always happy to connect.
That's great. Well, thanks, Ben, for being with us. May God bless you and your family and your work. And thanks again for being with us. We'll see
Likewise,
you
thank you
again.
very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.